Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Apartment Department. My name is Ann Baum, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chris Johnson. And today we have a fan favorite with us, Stacey Feeney, who is the founder and chief creative director at Zipcode Creative. Stacey, hi. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so happy. You and I have known each other for a few years, and you're just doing such wonderful things in the industry. And so we're just really excited to talk to you today about a wonderful topic, sometimes misunderstood topic, but wonderful, important topic, brand, and of course the creative that comes along with it. So I know something that you've been really interested in recently is talking about how brand can really be an opportunity for marketers, property managers, owners, operators to kind of distinguish themselves and break away from the pack in this kind of sea of sameness that seems to be existing now, accelerated a little bit by AI. So tell us a little bit more about what the sea of sameness is.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that one up because it is a hot topic for me right now. Just thinking about our industry and the buildings themselves. Let's start there. They are all being built the same. So if we're thinking of new construction, we know they're all these luxury class A's being built for the most part. They've got that full amenity package. They all have the resort style pools and the wood look floors. So same amenities, same in-unit features, very slight differences in architectural style. Maybe if you're lucky, they've worked with an interior design firm that did something a little more creative with the clubhouse interior. But beyond that, I mean, they look near identical. And when the renter is searching, and they in their mind have a criteria they want, right? Maybe they want to make sure it has an in-unit washer and dryer, it's pet friendly with a dog park, whatever their list is. They're going to likely find, you know, a ton of options, all that meet their criteria out in the market they're searching in. And so at that point, and one more thing is that, they get to those websites and they find these places and they all are they look the same. The information on the site is the same. The bullet point amenity list is listing out those same things. And so at that point, however will they choose, right? It's like they have ton of options, all that meet their criteria. So I believe brand is our opportunity to really give them something to differentiate those options by, to speak to them, tell a story, emit a personality, a vibe, something they feel they can resonate with or relate to. And then they go, oh, that looks cool or interesting, or it feels like me, or I can imagine myself there because of the lifestyle and the story that it's telling. And then that's how they might make their choice. So when everything is the same out there, brand is our opportunity to differentiate.
I love that. And tell us a little bit about, for people who might be new to the concept of brand, what does that entail? Because I think a lot of times it's like, oh, people's minds go to logo, color palette. And I know you're a huge proponent of it's not just a logo and color palette. So what does brand mean?
Oh gosh, I love that question. And yes, I have this conversation, I feel like every single day with at least someone that crosses my path because a brand is so much more than a logo. But sometimes we are working with clients who already have a brand established, or a brand, I'm doing quotation, air quotes, because it is. They send me the brand sheet and it's just a logo, colors, and fonts if we're lucky. And, that is something that is a start to brand, but a brand is the whole picture of brand. It even starts with the name itself. What is the name of the company or the apartment community? How did you arrive at that? Is there a reason, a story behind it? That's a great place to even start to think about that brand story. And then the logo, of course, that's a key component, an essential basic necessity. I think of the logo as a way to visually, it's just a visual representation of the name. It's like if your brand was a human, I'm Stacey, that's my name, and you look at my face, that's kind of like my logo, that's my recognizable feature. You recognize faces, right? But then think about what everything else could be, even in a person. You start to notice their clothing style, kind of what is their outfit like? What colors do they wear? But what kind of patterns or stylistic choices do they make in their clothing? That's really their visual identity, is what we call it. And it starts to tell us a story and paint a picture of who that person might be, or in the case of the brand. And so we think of other brands that are known, like Louis Vuitton, for example. They have a brand pattern. It's always even on their purses and stuff. That's part of their visual identity that sits outside of the logo and outside of the color palette, even. So these sort of things are what make up the visual cues of a brand that help us recognize them beyond a logo. Because sometimes a logo it can only get us so far in remembering it, excuse me. But for color is important too. We think of Target, we think of the red. We think of Starbucks. We do think of their logo because it has that identifying mark, but it's more. It's got like symbols in it and shapes that are interesting. But these are the visual cues. And then the last piece to brand, which is often the one that gets missed, especially in this industry, is the verbal identity, or what we might also refer to as brand voice or messaging. People call it brand positioning. And this is truly that storytelling component. It's how we can use words to describe who we are, what is our personality, what do we offer, but it's not just that factual bullet point amenity list saying here's what we offer. It's the painting the picture. It's telling you, if you live here, what will it be like? What are you going to get in the more aspirational sense of what it means to live in this building, or live in a home, or shop at a store, or purchase something from a certain brand.
That was a great description. And all these years I've been doing this, nobody's ever explained it that way.
Oh,
That's a
cool.
perfect way to describe the brand. I have so many thoughts in my head. I feel like my head is filling up with all these light thoughts. But Stacey, how do we pull that out? Let's say we don't have a brand new community and we have an older community, and maybe we've been around for a while, or we are rebranding. How do we pull that information out and really create something that's meaningful, that prospects will pay attention to, and residents for that matter?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good one, because you're right. It's not all new construction in multifamily. We have existing assets, and ones that are often being renovated for value add or other things. And first, I would say look at the reason behind why we might want to refresh the brand first. Is it because we are renovating and we are giving it that facelift in the physical sense of the property? So therefore a brand realignment would go well with that. Sometimes we're doing it because there's a reputation issue, and maybe even our resident base, we want to kind of switch who our renters are, and target a different type of person. Sometimes it's because there's been an acquisition and you're forced to rebrand, but it also could be that just under new management, you want to say, hey, someone else is managing this building now, and we want to give it a new um, vibe or whatever to kind of go along with that. And so whatever the reason may be, it's important to know, because we would position the brand accordingly. If we're trying to tell a new story, a different story, or maybe there's nothing wrong and the community is great, and we want to tell that story of like, man, there's been people that have lived here for 20 years that they'll never leave because they're just loyal. And that's a cool story to tell. So what is that story, and how do we then approach it? I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I can expand more.
Yeah.
It does answer the question.
So is that part of the process? Like, do you go in and talk to site staff, talk to residents, talk to, how do you get the information of what the property is?
Yeah. It depends on, when we're usually working with the marketing teams, I would say. And sometimes they'll bring in someone that's an on-site expert or has been there a while and really knows the ropes around there. but it's asking a lot of questions and trying to dig that out of them. We do in-depth brand questionnaires that try to pull that out, and then we get on calls like we are right now and just chat it through. I'll ask them a ton of questions and try to get that information. If we're lucky enough to receive actual like resident statistics, like you can pull reports from your PMS or whatever to show us, who's living there in the sense of demographics and things like that, or how long have they been there and things of that nature. And then we'll just do market research on the area. So I think that's one thing that's cool about Zipcode Creative is that we recognize, and partly why we're named Zipcode is because it's very location based, the business we're in. Apartment building is in a very specific location of where someone is going to live and spend all of their time, and why do they want to live there. And so we do a lot of research on answering those questions. Who are the people? Why are they there in this area of town or whatever? Is it because of their job? Is it because it's a desirable area? Does it offer them a lifestyle of like, I can walk to the coffee shop or whatever things that they like to do and how they like to spend their time? And then we answer that. How do they like to spend their time? What do they do outside of work or school or whatever it might be? And then from there, position the brand to speak to those people and to answer those questions in how we tell our brand story and how we present the brand. Often I say, a good rule of thumb is if we know who we're targeting, that we want to be that ideal resident that would live here, then build the brand to like reflect that person back to themselves like they're looking in a mirror, because you're going to be drawn to what you see is you, or the aspiration of who you want to be.
That's really interesting. This is not related at all, but I've always heard that when people find their spouses, it's basically someone that like looks like them, but just like if you like say, like if I put long hair on my husband, like in theory his like he and I would look similar. So what we're talking about
or like how your dog starts to look like you or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love it. Like I look in the mirror at the apartment building and I see the place that I want to live. Because you're right. Like I think something that, and we've talked about this before, but there's this kind of idea of like, a struggle of like marketers saying like, well, who's your ideal resident, and an owner or someone saying whoever wants to pay us rent, and it's it's not like yes in real life, but that's not a real answer. Like our properties are not for every resident because they have personalities. And I think what's interesting too is that if we're not actively defining the brand and personalities, it doesn't mean that there isn't a brand and personality. It just means that we're not capturing it and using it to our advantage as marketers. And so brand exists whether we've facilitated it along or not.
Yep. Yep. And to your point there, sorry, Chris, I know you were going to talk, but I just wanted to touch on that because we often do hear this, right? Like, well, I don't want to alienate anyone. I want everyone to live here. But everyone has heard this saying that if we are trying to appeal to everyone, we're going to appeal to no one. And I think that's what's happening right now, and why we are in the sea of sameness is too much trying to appeal to everyone. And the truth is that we can look at the research and say, okay, here's the most common type of person based on demographics and things like that. And someone who has the income that meets our rent, costs and this and that, and, would like to enjoy the amenities we offer and all the things, and decide who is that ideal person. That's where we do persona building work. But it's not going to alienate other people. It's going to attract people of all sorts and kinds, really. It's just that we have to aim in some direction, or else we're being too broad, we're being too generalized. And, what's interesting is I actually heard a story recently of a company who had I think they had 5 different properties all in the same, like very close radius of a sub-market somewhere. And they were all relatively newer construction, and they, kind of had a blank canvas, like to brand each one, and they owned them all. They basically monopolized that little market. And so they purposely did slightly different interior design vibes and brand stories to go along with that did appeal to different facets of really what would be the same customer persona of that area. And you ended up seeing a different variety of people that would go towards one building over another. But really, I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but I think the moral of that story is like we all have different things inside of us. Like I like outdoorsy things. I like Patagonia, but I also like to be bougie and, go to a fine dining restaurant. Like there's different aspects
Yeah.
of each person and who we are. And so, I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is like you kind of in that case had this perfect test case where you were able to see that brand does make a difference because it was pretty much the same building within the 5 properties, but the brand ended up being the draw for the residents. And so, I mean, that's about as, good of a kind of test case that you can get in in branding and marketing and real estate. So I love that. I love that story.
Yeah, it's a great story. Ann and I have talked about this a lot. Ann loves brand. Our sponsor, Flamingo, Jude, loves brand. And he talks about this a lot. And quite frankly, in all my years of doing this, I've really truly only worked for one company that really tried hard. 1.5, I would say. But Lewis out of California really tried hard in branding their communities and branding Lewis, both for the master plan, the new home stuff, and for their apartments, meaning they have a Santa Barbara line, they have a homecoming line, and Santa Barbara meant something to anybody that was visiting Santa Barbara. It was basically, if you've ever been there, it had the vibe of Santa Barbara, the city, which is beautiful. Homecoming was big, huge clubhouse, big pools, all of the things, larger communities. Santa Barbara is smaller. And they had a couple other lines within that. Why has our industry just been so afraid of it? When you think about this, even the big brands out there, you can't really pinpoint it. There are a few, there are a few that do it, like Lewis and some others, but for the majority, they don't. Why? Especially with those that own a ton of units.
I would love to know that answer. And for anyone who's listening, please call in and tell us why. I know this isn't a live call, but
It should
First
be
5
for
days,
this because
First time, long time.
yeah. But no, I think that I've heard feedback from people that have basically said that it kind of came down to an older school mentality of some of the owners or people who kind of make the ultimate decision of where the money's going to be spent, where they still believe that it's back how it used to be, where it's, build it and they will come. And so they feel like, yep, just slap a logo on it because we got to build it and they will come. But the truth is, no, because it's too saturated. There's too many options and they all are great options and they're all the same. So you have to do something to stand out in the crowd.
Can people
No.
start branding on staff and cleanliness of community and make that the voice of, hey, we actually do this differently?
Yeah.
Put that in and make that as part of the brand. I find that, we do that. And I find it hard to, I can put it out there. Our residents love XYZ, but I just feel like that's hard to capture. Any takes or any advice on how we can do that and push that message?
Definitely. I would say it's actually something it's part of the equation that we look at is who is the operator of the building and what are you offering in terms of that service, that customer service, that almost like company culture that comes only from more of the corporate operations side. And then we start to ask, well, how involved do you want to be? How forward facing do you want that corporate brand to be known? Do we want the apartment brand to just stand alone and we don't need to know who's behind the scenes on it? Do we want to know who's behind the scenes on it? Or do we want it to be even more overt, like hey, whatever company we are, we want to be like the next, hotel chain. Everyone knows our name in every household, right? So we need to decide at what level is that being brought into the brand conversation. But even no matter the level, it's definitely a differentiator, a selling point, a marketing message, a brand message to say, like, this is how we do things around here. And it is different. It's better. It's, that homegrown feel or whatever it is. Or, hey, our staff themselves have been here for 20 years and that's telling you something. They're happy here. And so are the residents too. And so there's definitely a part of the story that should be that.
I think that's the hardest thing to capture. I really do, because yes, you can say we're actually going to fix things and listen to you, but you can't really experience that on a tour, right? You can't experience that until you actually move in. And so then you're having to trust us, which gets us into all the trouble anyway. You have to trust the marketers that we're telling you the truth. And that's why reviews become so important, I think, because that's your trust when they do go look at it. And that can enhance your brand voice, at least in my opinion. And your thinking.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, Chris. I mean, because we think a lot about our brand as we do implement the town brand at our properties in kind of subtle ways, like the folders that people get after the tour are town folders, for example, not property folders. But we really say that the town brand is our tagline or whatever is great places to live. And so how do you know that you're at a great place to live? Well, all of our policies and procedures and ways of operating in theory should show up at the property because they're all designed around creating a great place to live. And so then when you're talking about the reviews are holding the individual properties accountable. Basically, are they operating at the standard that has been set by the policies, procedures, operating, etc.? So it's almost like an accountability measurement when you think about it. So when you said that about the reviews, it was just kind of more of like, oh yeah, that is a good way, like a good guardrail. Like, are we delivering what's promised? And it shows up in the reviews. So, but yeah, that's like $1 million question. Some people put all of their properties under one brand, one corporate brand, and then kind of highlight that and have their own website with all the properties and everything. So there's so many. I don't know.
Yeah,
Because there's a lot of avenues. Yeah, a lot of avenues we can take.
Yeah. And now a message from our sponsor, Flamingo. Every multifamily marketer wants to know what the next big thing will be. At the apartment department, we think that resident retention is the next big thing, which is why we're excited to have Flamingo as our podcast sponsor. Flamingo, founded by Jude Chai, is an all-in-one resident retention platform used by some of the top-performing communities in the country. And here's a fun little secret. If you see a community with 300 plus online reviews and 65% plus retention, there's a good chance they're using Flamingo. From automated renewal management and resident events to amenity bookings and even an AI concierge, Flamingo brings everything together in one sleek app that residents actually use. Learn more at getflamingo.com.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a conversation we're having more and more as we also help the corporate property management companies with their branding as well. Many of them are recognizing maybe we should be a little more involved at the property level and they know who we are and things like that. And so as they're thinking about that and we're starting to rebrand and brand refresh some of those corporate brands so that they can show up more how they would really want to and in a good light and things like that. But to your point, it is a matter of defining who you are. Number one, it's like you have to admit there's a problem before you can change it, right, kind of thing. So how do you define who you are first? So going through that brand exercise and brand building, and then the next step is making sure your staff understands who that is and who you are and who you're defining that you are to be, but they have to believe it. You have to also be the brand. You have to do what the brand promises it will do, or else it's empty promises. No one believes it. And I think we see that a lot in marketing as we say, oh, well, we have great customer service. Well, everyone says that. Do you actually? And that's to your point, Chris, where the reviews tell you the truth of the matter. Like, well, do we? Um, but yeah, like knowing the brand, or defining it, knowing it, telling it and training on it, and then making sure you're living it out and training on it down to the property level. And I think that's where it often gets missed as well, is that handoff to the on-site teams. And look, they're the ones dealing with the end customer. They're the ones talking to the resident. And if they don't know what the brand is, how are they ever going to tell that story when they're giving tours or whatever?
That's the other piece of this too that's hard, is getting the staff to buy in. We need to remember they have a lot going on. Those staff members on site are busy with residents, with prospects, with phones, with maintenance, with everyday stuff that happens on our sites. And having them drill in and like remember this stuff is hard. I mean, that's another piece. If we do go with the brand and get the voice and really run with it, we need to train, because the team needs to be able to carry that through. You can't just send them an email and say, this is what you need to do. That doesn't work.
Stacey, you and Lauren talked about that at Multifamily Strategic Marketing Summit. You had a whole session exactly on how do you make sure that after the brand is defined, that the story is told all the way through and it continues to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that one of the biggest concerns we hear with that, I mean, well, two really, is everyone's spread thin. How do we find the time to train? And then on the other piece, it's like, well, with on-site teams, we see a lot of turnover. And so then we're training again and again. But I mean, you guys, we live in a digital world. We can have videos that we film one time and they can watch it again and again for years to come. So, let's not forget that. I think if we can just carve out the time for the marketing department to, someone has to understand the brand first. If, you work with an agency like ours, it's created, and then whoever's kind of that point person, usually it's a marketing team member, they would be the best ones to then express and explain what everything means, how to use the elements, if we're talking about the visual side, how to understand, how to read the brand guidelines and know what to do with it. I mean, and especially if you've had the verbal identity develop, that messaging part. Now, I mean, look, let's be honest, everyone's going to use ChatGPT or something like it to write copy. And so why not teach them? Well, the brand guidelines give you the rules and the voice and the tone and how we should speak and the words to use and not words to not use. And then feed that into your ChatGPT prompt, and then make sure that now you have that guideline and that example of what it should be like, and then match it up against that. And they can learn how to do that just as easily, as long as they know how to read it, how to use the document, how to use the elements. And then, maybe it's creating Canva templates and locking things down and only giving them editability access on certain things to ensure that things are looking cohesive. And it does require some time up front, and it's going to require a little bit of time in kind of policing it, making sure it's being done right and kind of checking in on that. But it's worth it in the long run, because we know that consistency, all of us marketers know that consistency wins every time.
It does. And I mean, you're even making me think too, like beyond, if you're using an agency or a third party for pay-per-click, sending them the brand guidelines so that the pay-per-click ads, the language in there matches what your brand is. If you're doing geofencing or streaming ads, same thing. Like, it really has to go. I mean, you almost have to map out all of the touch points where a prospect might see your brand, and then make sure that every single person responsible for those touch points either has the tools that they need or the information they need to make sure that it's cohesive. I think you bring up a very good point, that we forget all of the places that our brand lives, especially when we're kind of splitting between on-site teams, agencies, in-house teams. I mean, all of it, it's Something else that you said made me think too, it would almost be interesting to see the brand of a property used in like a hiring announcement, not a hiring announcement, but like a job description for that particular property. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but
Yeah.
typically you see like, hey, come work for property management company. This is about property management company, da da da. But it'd be really interesting to see like, hey, come be a manager at this property managed by property management company. Here's all about the property, and then here's about the property management company. Because actually, I bet that you could almost get people, especially if you're hiring for like multiple properties, you could almost get people to kind of self-select which property they're interested in working on at based on the brand of the property.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. It falls along the lines of the culture play.
Yeah.
Like when we think, it's like, well, again, it's like even for you, what would it be like to work here? What would it be like to live here? It works the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, because like just gonna tell you, I would not want to work at like a place where it was chaotic all the time. Like that would like my personality would that would make me crumble. And so not that you can say like this place is not chaotic, but like I think, there would probably I could probably read a description of a property brand and be like, oh, that seems like it's nice to work there. Or oh, it's not fast paced enough for me. Or oh, what
Yeah.
people know the work environments that they enjoy. So, okay, I like
Interesting.
this. I think we're on to
Well,
something.
I think I got a little nugget. We like to take one nugget to pass along to listeners. The brand voice in chat for the teams is brilliant because they'll remember,
Yeah.
or if you're allowed to use AI, or you could do it for them and create some templates in that brand and send it off. AI is can do it much faster than all of us. Of course, we got to look through it. But that was my other piece too. I feel like with AI being adopted so quickly everywhere, that should help us with brand. That should help us move this movement forward because we can use AI to help us in these cases. And if we are using it for responses and on the phone and all of the things, you can train it to have a personality
Yeah.
and your voice. So that's kind of an interesting play too, that maybe I hadn't thought of a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it definitely opens up the ability for people who aren't designers, who aren't copywriters to now be that. But if you don't have the solid foundation first of having built the brand and done it right and thoroughly, then you're going to get a mixed bag. You're going to get AI slop when they're attempting to do that. So, I mean, it's one of these things, right? Like it can take us farther faster, but we've got to give it the right prompting from the start.
Of course, garbage in, garbage out. I totally agree.
Like, we've been training Copilot agents to help us interpret requests when they come in, for example. So we basically train it on internal documents. And anyway, but the point being is that you can share the Copilot agents with coworkers. And so I'm almost picturing a world where, like in a Microsoft house, you have a Copilot agent trained with each brand, and then you share it with that particular site team. And so if they are going to create their own email to send out to residents or whatever the case may be, like you guys are saying, it's trained already and it's in a controlled environment. Actually, you could probably even then train it on all the brand elements, the style sheets. You could give it access. Again, if you're a Microsoft house, I'm thinking about this specifically, you can give it access to the SharePoint with all of the logos, textures, font. I mean, everything. Like you really could. And it wouldn't, if you had your file structure right in your folder structure, it wouldn't take that long to basically like train an agent based on a couple folders of a brand and then share it with a team. So I think you guys are right. This is really easily controllable once but the foundation, like Stacey said, has to be in place first so that you can train the AI to make it go faster, better, safer, all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. The problem that I would caution is don't have it make your brand because because one thing we're realizing is that yeah, AI can do a lot and it's obviously hella smart, but it only really can look backwards. It can only look at what has ever existed before or is known information or knowledge. It's not great at ideating and creating a forward, new, fresh, out of the box thinking thing that it only can source from what it knows it has already existed. And that's why we see it producing the same kind of stuff. And so, again, I say, rally for the brand agencies out there, like have real professionals creating your brands so that they're really strategically, thoughtfully crafted, uniquely approached, and then from there do all the rest like we're saying. Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I can't take credit for this because I have no s- no proof. But one of the names that I used at Waypoint was Marlowe, and Gray started a lot of third party for them, and they're using Marlowe now. And we that name, all of the names that we came up with back then, Bradley, I have a Bradley now, I had nothing to do with that. Or like Bradley came up with how the name of the company and some of the executives there and things like came together and used those letters to create Bradley. I mean, it was really thoughtful stuff at Waypoint, and I really enjoyed it. And we really did create a brand and a lot of these names and brands that we could use moving forward. It does make a difference, and we did stick out in the market. Um, it's fun when you can do it. It's what I think that's the fun part of marketing, the creative part of marketing. And there are professionals like you, Stacey, out there that do this and put a lot of time and effort into it. We worked with a firm at Ash and Green that came up with some really great stuff for us that was different, and stood out in the market because it was different in the way that you thought about it and how you use the logos and like the thought process behind it and what we were going to do moving forward. So I totally agree. And anytime I've tried to put something into AI to create, it's never come out. And I haven't done it with logos, but just in general with creative stuff, it just never comes out the way that I think it's going to come out. And you're the second person recently to mention that it's not forward thinking, which I think we all need to remember
Yeah.
when using AI. Like it's coming along. It's a lot better than when I started using it, probably 3 years ago after that Super Bowl ad. It's come a long way since then, but we still have a long way to go. It'll happen probably faster than it did in the 3 years. But you can't just trust it. And it's not a forward thinking thing. I think we need to, and that might be a talking point we just continue mentioning, because it's not going to give you something like you said, out of the box new.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not going to be trained on, I mean, I think that's the other thing too, is like the time and detail and source information that your team goes through. Someone is probably, if they're just going to go to AI and say, create me a brand, that's probably literally going to be the prompt. Create me a brand in this area and I like orange or something. I mean, I don't know, but it's like we're talking about, it's most people aren't going to have the expertise to lead it through a brand creation. And so I think that is what I've taken away from today, is that's really the fundamental part, is the story behind the brand. And it takes time and effort and knowing the right questions and knowing the right sources to really pull that out. So any horror stories about AI and creative, or are people coming now with like, hey, I created this in AI, what's going on? What are you seeing?
Yeah, we have seen recently some of our clients coming to us to design a piece, and maybe not, because we offer things beyond just brand. We do a la carte graphic design services and copywriting and things as well. All of those creative services, even just in a one-off nature, but they'll come to us and be like, here's what I want. And like they had AI created, so they have like an actual graphic thing to show us, but we still want you to make it. And I think part of that is because it's not maybe outputting the right file type for them to be able to print it or make it large, or it's not vector or things like that. But it's decent stuff, what I'm seeing. I mean, and this again is not in the context of brand, because I haven't been impressed with anything I've seen on the front of brand, but yeah, I don't know, it's interesting. And so if anything right now, it's giving us it's giving the person who's asking for the request a way they can visually
Yeah.
explain their idea. Because I do find that before this, sometimes it really is like us pulling teeth to draw out of them. What do you want? What's your idea? They don't know how to say their idea or express it. And so AI can at least help them do that and demonstrate to us, like, kind of in the vein of what they're thinking. And then it just maybe gets us in the right direction quicker. But we still, can produce, again, something better and more creative.
Then yeah, I've used that before too, because me trying to explain something in visual terms to our graphic designer, who just, if you say a word, she's got the whole concept mapped out, you know what I like. And so sometimes my thoughts and her brain wouldn't translate together well. And so I did find that, because I wasn't able to verbally express design, and so I did find, and I have found that sometimes using an AI tool to say, like, this is kind of what I'm thinking, but now take your expertise and layer it on top, has been a good way to bridge that gap of, that existed before, the communication gap that existed before. And then we've also seen some crazy things where we've gotten AI design stuff and we're like, please don't do anything with that. Please don't, like I'm like getting hives thinking about it. So
Yeah. What, and another story I can share is, like, I've actually, as I should be, like, kind of testing it and pushing its limits, and at least knowing that, like, as a creative director, I know I'm the best suited person to prompt AI for the potential of it creating a brand. I haven't fully delved into the visual side of what it can do yet, and that's on my radar, but for naming a property, I've done some testing, and I'm telling you, with as much as I prompt it, I mean, I am giving it so much, like, layers of research and detail, and even, like, my creative directive ideas. And I'm even telling it, like, create something unique, even make up a fake word that never existed, like Kleenex, right? That wasn't a word, but it became a brand. I'm like, do something like that. I'm giving examples, and it's going like, okay, how about oak tree but smushed together so it's its own unique word? Right. I'm like, well, so again, because we have problems like this in our industry where we see these names like Oak Tree Apartments, and, we see these type of things again and again. So that was its attempt to give me a unique made up word. Was it just took two words and smushed them together?
that's incredible. That's like when I first started at Town, we had like a list of, like, it was basically like an equation, like pick street name and then add flats or APTS or living, or what I like. It was literally like a piece of paper, and we would all sit around in a circle and like come. So we were the manual version of ChatGPT trying to come up with property names.
That's because you're not creative people.
I just want a spreadsheet, Stacey.
And love spreadsheets, that's for sure. Well, believe it or not, we talk. I mean, it's been the 40 minutes already, 45 minutes. It's crazy how fast this goes. You gave us some really good insights. We do like to finish with predictions, and I know nobody has a magic wand or some sort of crystal ball. But where do you think our industry is going? Maybe take the brand piece out and just think multifamily in general. What's next for us? What's the next big thing? What should our listeners be looking out for?
Well, I primarily can only speak to the brand side of things mostly, but I do think it kind of goes with the properties themselves and how they're being designed and developed, which goes hand in hand with brand. I would say, as we are going to only get deeper in the sea of sameness, with AI's help along the way, I think we are going to see a shift where we're going to have to pull ourselves out of that by getting creative and really looking at, how do we tell a story? How do we get back to, redefining what it means to be human, and how do we live our lives, and really thinking about, like, I'm a person. What do I do when I get off this call? I'm off work hours. What am I going to go do and hang out and do, right? Thinking about all those things and really shifting more into that lifestyle play. And that might even affect how we're offering the types of amenities we're offering, and things like that could shift and change. And I don't know exactly what that would be at the moment, but that's where I see it going.
I like it. One other thing around that too is I think there's an opportunity for brand to come into play, like you're talking about earlier in the development stage, to even be able to tell the story to like the community. Development isn't just, oh, you buy land and you build a building. It's like you have to go to city council meetings and you have to get in front of neighborhood watch groups. That's not the right term, but like these neighborhood, alliance groups. And I mean, you have to get buy-in from neighbors. And I'm really thinking about the opportunity because if you don't do that well, even if a project gets approved, you'll see for years in community Facebook groups and stuff like, oh my gosh, this development came in and ruined our community and blah, blah, blah. So the point that I'm getting at is like, I think there are so many reasons that brand should be thought of just before I think it typically is now. And you've brought up a bunch of good points, but it made me think about that too, is like the story we're telling for all of these groups could probably help facilitate even like the development and approval process and make communities embrace developments where before maybe there's been friction.
I love that thought. Yeah. I think the trouble is they aren't going to want to invest and spend money on the development of something like brand when they don't even know if they're going to get the chance to. But sometimes you might say, well, that's the cost of doing business, right? Like
Right.
if it's going to better our chances, and there are obviously other costs associated to get them to that point, like working with an architect and having the plans built out so they can take those plans to the city and see if they would approve them. So maybe it's wrapped into those sort of budgets very early on. And hey, if we can get it even earlier, then that means we can pre-lease and do our marketing earlier and start leasing up before the building is even done and delivered.
Yeah.
So I'm always a fan of doing brands sooner than what we normally see it being done as.
Yeah. No, I love it. Chris, anything else? I
This
don't
was
want to let
great.
Stacey go, so I'm like, you
Yeah.
have to have something else, right?
Which is amazing. Stacey, it's great to have you on. We just appreciate it so much. You bring so much value to the industry, and your wealth of knowledge and branding. You really, to the audience out there, really does make a difference. From two people that love to brand, Ann and I, we do believe in it. So thank you for coming on and giving us those insights.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I love my multifamily. So it's so honoring to be a part of this conversation and to be the voice of brand in our industry. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you. Everyone go check out Zipcode Creative and Stacey and her wonderful team. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you to Carlos, Chris. Thank you, of course, to Flamingo, our sponsor. Thank you. We appreciate you. And until next time, this has been the Apartment Department.